Hi, my name's Alyssa. Thanks for watching today. Before we get started, we wanted to fill you in on our church. Here at Grace, we have a mission and a purpose. Our goal is to help people discover truth, decide on Jesus, demonstrate change, and deploy for others. If you're looking for a church, we would love for you to come be a part of what God is doing here at Grace. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. We would also like to invite you to one of our Sunday morning services. Check out ohiograce.com for a list of campuses and service times in your area. We have a great time gathering for music, hanging out, and learning about who God is and how that affects our lives. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you here next week at Grace.
What's up, church? How you guys doing? How was your week at work? A little less, all right. How was your week at work? Okay, all right. You don't have to lie to me, just, whatever. All right. Hey, today we're going to be continuing on in our series called Don't Waste Your Work. And I get it. Some people just hate work, right? Or the job or whatever you do. You're just like, I don't know, this is just not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I can't wait to get out of here. I got to, come up with a plan for something else. And the honest truth is you just dread work. All right, you dread your job. You don't want to be thinking about tomorrow. This is the weekend, and you're at church, and I don't want to think about tomorrow morning where I got to drag myself out of bed. There's people like that. Some of you guys in this room, right? Like we've all been there before. Okay, we've all had a job that we didn't enjoy going to. But what we found out last week when we started this series, kind of the foundational principle, is that work is good. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Thank you, all three of you that wanted to say that. Work is good. All right, it's good. Remember? Do you remember? Okay, all right. Work is good for us. We were literally created for work, all right? It's not like God came to Adam one day and was like, oh, I'm so disappointed in you. Here's your consequence. Now you're going to have to work. That's not how it was, all right? God comes to Adam. He's like, Adam, guess what? I have work for you to do, all right? This was before sin. This was before anything. God created us to work, and we looked at that last week, and we also looked at last week that not only were we created to work, and not only should we work, but we were created to work hard. In fact, Christians should be the hardest working people in the workplace. Now, let me clarify a couple things about that statement right there. We are supposed to be the hardest working people in the workplace. What I do not mean is that we necessarily have to be the most skilled or the most talented or the most intelligent people in the workplace, okay? Some of that stuff, all right, I get that we can't control. Although, let me push back on that for just 1 second. Although, all right, I think some of those things like skill is stuff that we can work on, like we can get better at, okay? And we should be trying to get better at those things, all right? But I'm not saying we're going to be the most talented person in the workplace. I'm saying hardest working, all right? Now, let me clear one more thing up. When I say hardest working, what I'm not saying is that God expects us to spend necessarily more time at work. But one thing, some of us should spend more time at work because we're the type of people, we get to work late and we cut out early. Okay? That's not good, all right? Some of us, we should be working for the amount of time that we are allotted to work. And but when I say hard working, what I'm saying is, all right, during that time that we are working, we should be working hard. Not saying you have to go home and go, I got to work on set. No, that's not what I'm saying. While you are working, we are to work hard. Meaning, if you work at a manufacturing plant, okay, you should be the hardest working employee at that plant, okay, because you're a Christian. This is for Christians, all right? If you are, in the office, you should be the hardest working person in the office. On the job site, you should be the hardest working person on the job site. If you're a teacher, you should be the hardest working teacher in your district, and it should show up. And if you don't have a job, you're off the hook. Just kidding. All right. But if you're a student in here, you're like, well, I don't have a job, so how does this really, apply to me? If you're a student, your schoolwork is your work, all right? If you don't have a job, but you stay home and you take care of the kids and the family and all that stuff, all right, we totally understand. That's your work. If you're retired, you've put in a bunch of years of work, but you still shouldn't be sitting around doing nothing, right? Like, we understand this. Whatever you do with your time that's productive, okay, that's your work. So this idea of work and this whole series, it applies to every single person in here because we all were created to work. We're all created to work hard. Now, when we think about work, all right, a lot of us, most of us, we think about what we do or who we are or how much money we make or where the job is going to take us, or maybe more than anything, probably most of us, we think, what are we working for? Okay, what are we working for? And probably, if we were to get down deep, probably most of us were working more than just for the check, right? I mean, there's more involved with that. I mean, some of it's status, respect. Maybe it's just to prove something to somebody that said you couldn't make it this far or do this, or maybe it's some lifestyle, that you're like, I want this certain standard of lifestyle, or maybe it's the American dream, right? The American dream where you graduate high school, you go to college, or a lot of people, they go to college and then you get a bunch of debt, and then you go get a job, and you start paying off that debt. You get married, you have your 2.5 kids, you have your house with your picket fence, everything's good. Like that's the American dream that you have, and then you work until someday you get to retire from working, right? And you're like, oh, I cannot wait for that day, right? Retirement. And what we end up doing is we spend a third of our life working so that someday we can stop working and we can enjoy our stuff for a few years. But when we do that, right, when that's our motivation, right, and that's why we work, when we do that, we've wasted a third of our life. In the meantime, while we work, so we don't have to work, we're wasting a third of our life. And as Christians, there's really another layer there, and that's that no matter what you do, all right, focus in here, no matter what you do, your work matters to God, all right? No matter what you do, your work matters to God. It doesn't matter if you're, saving lives at the hospital or if you're, screwing a screw into a piece of metal. It doesn't matter. What you do, all right, your work matters to God. And we usually don't associate God with work. In fact, a lot of us, what we end up doing is we put work, or we have different aspects of our life. We talked about last week, right? We use the bricks. We use the bricks where we divided up our time, our work week, into 3 different segments. 1/3 was sleep, 1/3 was work, 1/3 was everything else. Let's throw out sleep, okay? Let's only talk about waking hours today. But what a lot of us do, right, we have our work bucket in our life, right? We put all our stuff all in about work there, and then we have our other bucket, which is really everything else, but everything else doesn't fit on the bucket. Okay, so we got the word other, all right? But this is everything else. So, all right, we have these 2 different aspects of our life. We got our professional life, all right, and we got our personal life. Now, professional life, this is our driving to work and all the meetings that we have. Our professional relationships are in here. The contracts that we read up, just all this stuff goes into our work. And then maybe you go back to school or whatever, that goes in there. And all the time that entails, which is about a half of our waking time. And then everything else, this is like our playtime, right? And family time and church, just all kinds of stuff that we have. So we got these 2 aspects of our life, 2 kind of buckets of our life that we pour our lives into. But what a lot of us, not everybody in this room, but a lot of us, what happens is we became a Christian. And all of a sudden we got a brand new Jesus bucket. We're like, sweet, all right? And he kind of wedges himself in there. Now you got work, you got Jesus, and you got everything else, and we're pouring all this stuff. This is church. We pour church in here. Maybe we do something really nice for somebody, like nicer than we normally are. We're like, I did that for Jesus. Hey, you see that? We throw that in there, and then if we pray, sometimes we pray. It's like, well, I'll throw that in my Jesus bucket. We start filling our Jesus bucket up. We fill up our everything else bucket up, and we fill up our work bucket up, and we got our personal life, which encompasses these 2, and we got our professional life, and we think we're pretty good, all right? We don't like to combine our professional life and our personal life, and we usually don't associate God with work because those are like 2 different aspects of our life that don't have anything really to do with each other, in our opinion. It's almost like we think like God doesn't have an opinion, but he does. He has an opinion on our professional life and our personal life, right, and how they relate to each other. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, we are going to be looking in the book of Colossians, which is just a letter that Paul writes to the Colossian church. And he really gives a lot of instructions on how to live our life and what to do and how Christians should act in life. He talks about husbands and wives and how they should relate to each other. Then he talks about parents and children and how they should relate to each other. Just really good stuff. And then he even talks about slaves and masters and how they should relate to each other. And by the way, he's not condoning slavery by any means. What Paul completely understands is that the Colossian church had a bunch of slaves within that church. Right? And back then, slave wasn't a race thing. It was more of a class thing. And so Paul, he's giving them practical advice, right, to a people that just principles on how to work even if you can't control your circumstances, which is what was happening in that culture back then. So Colossians chapter 2, Colossians chapter 3, verse 22 says, starts off, he says, don't work, all right, key word there, work is what we're talking about. Remember? Okay. All right. Don't work only while being watched as people pleasers. Now, you guys know people like this? Isn't it kind of funny that here's Paul, all right, he's talking to a people, this was written like 2,000 years ago, right? And it still applies to us today. Like we as people haven't changed. You know what I mean? Okay. We all know people like this, right? Does somebody come to mind when you think, oh, somebody who only works when the boss is watching? Okay, some of us a little bit. Okay, have we ever done that before? Us, ourselves? Yeah. No one wants to say anything, but there's a little rumble throughout the crowd, so I know they say yeah, okay? But every single one of us have done this, where we're doing something, maybe we're talking to somebody, and then the boss walks in, and we're like, oh, we're not talking, we're working. All of a sudden, you're really busy. It's just some people do that a lot more than others, which is annoying. But what Paul's saying here is he's saying, hey, don't work for people's approval, okay? That's not why you work. That's not what, as Christians, what we're all about. We're not supposed to be working as people pleasers. That's not why a Christian works. And some of you guys, you're looking at this and you're like, okay, well, so I'm not working for my boss's approval? Okay, that sounds pretty good. All right, I like this verse. Where's this at again? I'm gonna remember this. Like, who cares what the boss thinks? He's a jerk anyway, right? Like, I can't stand him. I like what Paul's saying here, but that's not exactly what Paul's saying. See, he's saying, no. We have a much bigger motivation as Christians. See, most people, why do they work? Why do we please the boss, right? Well, because we want him to promote us, right? We want him to make our job easier, right? We want him to give us a raise or something like that. Paul's like, yeah. That's all good stuff. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's not why we work. Not as Christians. That's not our motivation. He says, don't work only while being watched as people pleasers, but work wholeheartedly, fearing the Lord. He's saying the word wholeheartedly, it's with all your heart, right? He says work with all your heart, like with everything you got. Put it all on the line when you're at work, right? When you're doing whatever you're doing. Because our motivation, he says, is the Lord. That's our motivation, right? That's why we work. He actually clears this idea up a little bit in the next verse, in verse 23. He says, whatever you do. Now, let me stop right there for a second. I love this phrase, all right? Whatever you do, all right? Because I totally understand that there are people out there where you're looking at me up here and you're like, what's this kid know, all right? I've worked longer than he's been alive, right? And that's probably true for some people. I really don't understand how a pastor can give me advice on my job. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know what it's like to do what I do and to work with the people that I work with. He just doesn't understand. Or what some people are rationalizing in their mind, because I've been there. I've sat in the seats where you guys are sitting. I know how this is, right? What we are doing, what a lot of people do, is they are trying to figure out ways, you're trying to figure out ways your current situation doesn't quite fit with what Paul's talking about, right? We do that a lot in church. Every Sunday, it's just, my situation is a little different. It's a little more complicated than what Paul's saying here. No, you don't get an exemption here. Like, think of your best excuse that you got about why this, all right, that we're going to be looking at and working hard and all that kind of stuff, why this doesn't apply to you. Like come up, like right now, come up with your best excuse or whatever you got. This right here, whatever you do, Paul takes your best excuse and he kills it, all right? So what he does, he says it doesn't matter what you do, all right? This is an excuse killer right here. It doesn't matter what you do, all right? It doesn't matter. God doesn't care as much about the job that you have, but more about the job that you do with the job that you have, all right? It's not about where we work or what we do. That's not what matters. What matters is why we work and how we do it. So he says, whatever you do, whatever that is, wherever you work, he says, it doesn't matter, do it from the heart. Here he is. He's repeating what he just said in the last verse. He's saying, do it from the heart, meaning have some passion for what you're doing. Like, have some passion, right? Care. See, we as Christians are not to mindlessly be doing something that we hate, all right? That's not what we're called to do. That's not what we're supposed to be doing, all right? We're not supposed to ever do anything half-hearted, right? That's not how we work, right? That's not how we're supposed to work. That's not what God calls us to do. What he's saying is, hey, you need to work, and whatever you're doing, you need to be invested into it. Like, you need to have some heart in it. You need to have some passion. Actually, this word heart, it can also be translated as soul. He's like, put your soul into it, people. As Christians, we need to have passion and care for what we do. Now, when was the last time you went to work for a whole day, right? And had worked with all your heart? We don't do that, right? Right? Or maybe sometimes we're excited about something, and so then we're working with our heart, but most of the time, like, we don't go into work going, I can't wait to work with all my heart and all my passion. Like, we put it all out there. Like, we don't do that. So God's telling us today, no, this is standard. As Christians, that's how we are to work. That's what makes us the hardest worker at our workplace. So that's how we work. And then he explains why we work, right? He says, whatever you do, doesn't matter. Do it from the heart, all right? Put some passion into it. Put your soul into it as something done for the Lord and not for people. All right, so here, he's saying, hey, we don't work for those things that normal people work for, right? As Christians, we don't work for status and respect or to prove something to somebody that they're wrong and I could do it or for, to achieve our lifestyle or for the American dream, whatever that might be in our minds. Like, that's not why we work, not as Christians. We don't work for that kind of stuff. We don't work for ourselves. Technically, what he's saying is we don't work for our boss. It is so much more than that. He's saying every day when you go to work or whatever you do, he's saying, no, you work for God. You don't work for your boss. Don't view it like that. View it as you work for God. Like, God's your boss. Like, God's your manager. He's your supervisor. Now, some of you guys are like, I wish God was my boss. In fact, it's like it wouldn't hurt for my boss to be a little more God-like. Just a little bit. It wouldn't hurt. Have you ever had a bad boss, manager, supervisor at any kind of job before? Blaine, don't look at me like that, Blaine. But hey, we'll talk about that later. All right. Are they here in this room? No, don't point them out. Okay. Ever had a bad boss or manager? I mean, I get it, right? I've been there. I've had different times in my life, I've had the same scenario where, sometimes you're just like, my boss doesn't know what he or she is doing. You're just like, what is going on? Or it's just that they don't care. Like, I think sometimes that's just the problem. The boss is just like, whatever, I don't care. And that's not good for a manager, right? Or maybe your boss is terrible at resolving conflict. That's in the workplace. Or maybe, just maybe, your manager is the one who causes the conflict in the workplace. That ever happen? All right? Yeah, okay. Or maybe you think they're too demanding. Or maybe you're like, they're not giving you the promotion that you feel like you rightfully deserve, or they're not giving you the raise that you have worked hard for in your own mind. And so you're going, yeah. Yes, I hear what you're saying, Zach. I'd love to work for God because he's loving and forgiving and stuff. Yeah, but he's also the most demanding boss in the world. We get that? He's the most demanding boss in the world. You know why? Because God demands. He doesn't ask. He demands from us perfection. Now, he forgives us when we don't give it, because none of us do. But that's what he demands. He demands that we work for him, and he demands perfection. That's who Paul's trying to get us to understand. Paul's saying, that's who you work for. That's who we work for. Paul, he actually finishes the thought in verse 24. He says, so we do all this knowing that you will receive the reward of an inheritance from the Lord. And then he says this, just in case they didn't get it for the first 2 times that he said it, he's like, guys, listen, you serve the Lord Christ. He's saying you serve the Lord. Right? It's God. Okay, that's who we serve, right? That's what we do. See, we work from the heart because we work for God, knowing that someday we will be rewarded for the work that we've done. Now, you know what that reward is? It's the gospel, right? Which just means good news, right? Churchy word for good news. Basically, our reward is that 2,000 years ago, God himself came down in the dirt, born in the dirt in a barn of here on earth. He lived a perfect life, and then we ended up putting him to death in a horrible way, a death on a cross, and he willingly did that for us because every single one of us were in trouble because we are horrible, terrible sinners, including myself. I mean, we're all in the same boat here. But he paid that price for us. Why do you have to do that? Why can't you just forgive? Because a perfectly righteous being cannot just sweep it under the rug. You can't do that. It has to be paid for. The right thing is for it to be paid for. And he paid our penalty, our punishment. God poured out his wrath on himself so that we don't have to. And so for us as Christians, right, those of us who are Christians in here, instead of us going to hell and paying for all the things that we've ever done wrong, which sounds horrible, okay, right? God says, hey, you don't have to do that. But it's even better than that. Not only do we not have to go to hell and pay for everything that we've ever done wrong, we get to spend eternity with him, our creator, a being who wants a relationship with us. We get to spend eternity with him in heaven. So it's even better. It's this huge reward that none of us can even understand how awesome and great and how giving that is. And so what better motivation is there? This is what Paul is trying to point out to us. He's saying it's not that we work hard so we don't have to go to hell, okay? That's not why we work, right? We don't go to heaven because of all of our good work, right? It's that God has saved us from hell. Those of us who are Christian, we've chosen that relationship with God, and so we want to work hard for him. It's already happened. That's why we work. It really changes our perspective and our mindset of work. And when we quit working for ourselves, and when we start working for God, dude, it changes everything. I mean, it changes our life. It changes everything. See, we should go to work with passion, and we should work hard to be the best that we possibly can, and we should want to. All right? We aren't just working for the paycheck anymore. In reality, we're working to do what God has told us to do, which is to tell others about Jesus. Like, that is our central thing. That's exactly that's the mission that God has given every single Christian in this room, that, hey, you guys are to tell other people who don't know Jesus that they can actually be forgiven. That's why we work, and our job becomes a place to do our work. All right, so why do we work hard? We don't work hard for the paycheck. We don't work hard to get that promotion. We don't work hard to accomplish the American dream or whatever that might be. No. He's saying we work hard so that people will notice, so that in reality that will point people, our hard work will point people to God who can save them. Our job becomes a place to do our work. And our work is to do whatever we possibly can to reach as many people as we possibly can to Jesus, for Jesus before we die, before our time's up. That's what we're supposed to be all about, especially in the workplace. And I can't think of a better example of this than a lady who goes to our church. Her name's Kathy. I'll let her kind of tell how she uses the workplace to reach people.
My name's Kathy Mcallister. I've worked at Burlingame Plastics since October of 1992 as a temporary employee. I got hired in June of 93, and in August of 2002, I was offered a job in the office. The office manager quit, and they wanted someone in the office, and I think they figured out I could talk, so they brought me in the office. There have been temps that have come in. One girl, she kept telling me, you remind me of my grandma. You talk about Jesus. You remind me of my grandma. And oh, she had such a rough life, but I loved her. So I do try and talk to people about Jesus. Brian Smith, he would ask me questions. He knew I was a believer. I was kind of verbal. And he would ask me questions like, who did Adam and Eve's kids marry? And what about the dinosaurs? As time went by, we would have conversations. He was honest, always honest, very candid. He got married young. He kind of had a plan, I think, and it wasn't going as planned. And he ended up coming to faith in Christ. I've got customers that I've been able to talk about Jesus with. And if you're a believer, you have something to offer above and beyond the norm. And people are God's gonna put people in your life, that none of it is by accident. And we all started at the same place without him. You know, we need to know that there are people out there that, like me at 32, said, why didn't someone tell me this before? Especially now, people, they have to be confused and frightened, and any stability that you have in your life is going to show up. It's going to show.
There's one quote in there, something that Kathy says in there that I just love. She says, if you're a believer, you have something to offer above and beyond the norm. That's what Paul's saying. All right, we have something to offer above and beyond the norm. There's something different about us, a good thing that's different about us. We should stick out at work. Later on, this week, we were talking to Kathy, and she was talking about her boss, who's the owner of where she works, and the owner, she was struggling to have a baby, and she was explaining how she was able to show God's love through praying for her. Check this clip out real quick.
One year we were going to Founders Week, and I said, well, I'll be praying for you. I remember sending her a note from Chicago telling her I'm praying for you now. And after several failures of whatever wasn't working, the fall of 97, she said, I just want you to know that God has answered your prayer. I'm pregnant. And she, to this day, says that God answered your prayer. I remember when she had him, and I was so invested in that through prayer that when I didn't know them all that well. Now, this was 98, so I'd been there about 5 years, but still, I didn't know them that well. And they were at the hospital, and I thought, I'm not sure if this is right, but I'm going. I just went to the hospital and saw them right after the baby was born. She was like just delivered. Her mom and dad were there. But it was a really kind of a powerful answer to prayer. One thing that happened is that I made a bargain with God that if I said, Lord, if you'll just let her have a child, I will talk to them about Jesus. Never do that. I said, Lord, I'll share my testimony, and I'll do it if you please give her a child. So then here I said that to the Lord. I made that promise, and I'm like, I went out to my car to eat lunch one day, and I'm really sidestepping and shuffling like I'm knowing I got to do this now. And I said, Lord, they're just home from the hospital. I'm really rationalizing. I said, if I know I'll talk to them at some point, and I'll share my faith with them then. But I said, and then I said, well, Lord, if she invites me over, which I never thought they would do, she walked out to my car that day and said, why don't you come over this weekend and see the baby? So I really had to, and I did. I boldly shared my faith. I said, I gave him a book about the Gospel of John, and I said, this is where my hope is. It is in Jesus. When I pray, it is not to some Santa Claus in the sky. It is to the living God who I believe really wants the best for us.
See, what someone like Kathy understands, okay. What somebody like Kathy understands is that our lives aren't in separate buckets. Right? We shouldn't be putting, all work stuff, all Jesus stuff, all everything else stuff. It all shouldn't. No, Kathy, what she understands is that it's all one bucket. Right? It's all in the Jesus bucket. Okay? Everything should be about our mission and our job and how we work for Jesus. Right? We don't have a professional life and a personal life. No, we just have a life. That's all we got. And when we get that, and when we finally understand, when we live our life through this lens, and when we gain this perspective, all of a sudden our life doesn't become all about us. All right, we work harder, and we work harder, and we work with our heart, and we work with passion because we realize that it's not for us; it's for Him. And really, that helps us unlock the desire to also be generous. All right, see, we as a Grace family here in Tiffin, like if we could just get this, if we could all be Kathy's in a sense, if we could just understand this, man, God would use us in such incredible ways here in Tiffin and Seneca County. I mean, God has already used us, but God could do so much more if we just worked for Him and kept Him at the forefront of what we do every single day. Real quick, I just want to kind of pull aside. Let's have a little chat real quick. Just for those of us who call Grace our church home. If you're new this morning, I did this first service and talked to a couple that this was their first time. I'm like, sorry, But if you're new with us, we're glad that you're here. All right, we want you here. We want you to come all the way, and we got nothing to hide here. But this, I'm only talking to for those of us who call Grace our church home. Okay, let me tell you this: it is an exciting time to be here. Okay, it's exciting to be here at Grace every week. Every week we have people who are coming to check us out for the very first time. We come up with this. We have this list each and every week that of people that have said, "Hey, this was my first time here. I'm just checking it out." All right, and a lot of you guys, you've done that, okay? Because that was you at one point. You guys remember the first Sunday here, right? Maybe half of you guys were here, or maybe less than that, really. A year and a half ago, right? I remember the first Sunday. Really, the few months coming up to the first Sunday. Man, I had already basically stopped my job where I was working before, and that had been given to somebody else. So it's not like I could go back to my job. It's kind of risky, all right? For me, selfishly, I'm thinking, you know what, God, this Tiffin thing better work. You know what I mean? All right. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go look for a job or something. I'm just I was kind of worried about here and there, and we're just trying this for the first time, so we had no idea what was going to happen. And I remember the first Sunday driving here to Tiffin, down 101, and I remember begging God for 200 people. Hey, if we could just get our 200 people that are like our launch team people, the people that were already going to our church, that would, from Tiffin, and that would actually, if they could just leave their home church and agree to doing that and come here to Tiffin, if they just do that, I'd be so happy, God, with 200 people. If you could just help 200 people to be here. And that first week, we had 400. Twice as much of what God is what I asked God for. Like, we outgrew our auditorium. We outgrew our building the first Sunday, all right? Not good planning on our part, okay? Maybe a little not as much faith as what we should have had. But because of that, we had to go immediately to 2 services, and I'm so glad we did that because our grand opening would have been it would have been horrible if we hadn't done that. But 2 services just gets us by for a while. See, what I've noticed as I've looked at other churches around, and not just around here, just other churches that we're affiliated with and stuff like that, but what I've noticed is that a church that has been working hard for a while, so like us, I would say those of you guys here at Grace, you're here every week, all right? For the last year and a half, you've been inviting people, you've been living your life right, you've been a good example, you've been working hard at your work, you've been serving here at church, and look around, like you've seen how God has used it. I mean, it's clear. And I think it's easy for us, including myself, to kind of feel accomplished and to almost feel done. Or maybe it's just kind of comfort. We get comfortable with, oh yeah, God's doing all the work, and I'm gonna rest off. Or I'm gonna take a little rest. too many churches do that, and that's a big, big problem. Too many churches, what they end up doing when they see a little bit of success, when they see what God is doing, because it's not us, it's our work, but God's the one who's doing it. When they see that, they take the foot off the gas pedal. That's not what we can do. And we're getting to the point, even though we're just a year and a half in, where it's time for all of us, including myself, to step up. Otherwise, we're going to have, we have some issues with our building when it comes to growth. Right? There's this rule that, again, this is only for the church family, but there's this rule that we kind of go by. I don't know where it came from or whatever, but it's just kind of the general rule of thumb for churches, that is that when your auditorium is 80% full, right, people will come, right, and we're talking new people, they will come, they will walk in through the doors, they'll get the family already, do all that work, they'll come to these doors, they'll walk in here, not be able to find a seat, and they'll leave. I haven't noticed that here in Tiffin yet, all right, but we have seen that happen in Fremont and some of our other campuses when we've hit that 80% mark. Now here in Tiffin, we're at 80% basically every service. Technically, these side sections aren't even supposed to exist. Those we put in as extra. Just because we needed seats. But yeah, we didn't plan big enough. And so here for our church family, man, we got some priorities that we got to take care of. And we got some priorities that we need to do that is going to cost money. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't like that. But that's just how it is. All right, one is parking, okay? It doesn't bother me that my family has to walk across the dirt parking lot and get their shoes dirty and stuff like that. But it does bother me when I see somebody new come in and they have to jump across the puddles and do that. Like the parking lot, that's our front door, right? That's the first thing that people see. It's the first thing that people walk over and the first area that people are at. And at first I thought, no lines, because our lines got shoveled off, we all noticed that. I was like, no lines, we got this. Like, we're smart people. But then I started looking. I go out there, on a Sunday, and you would think that people could park in a straight line, but it's like, it starts curving and stuff, But I'm in that too, so I'm sorry. But we got some issues we got to take care of as a church family. Okay, we got to do this. So we got parking that we need to take care of. We got an auditorium. Again, this is in no particular order. We got children's. We need children's space. We need a bigger auditorium, and we need adult class space, all right, that we don't even have one single room that we can really use for that on a Sunday morning. Right here, for the last few months, we've been coming up kind of with a master plan that we'll share here soon, but we have 5.82 acres here that we, as a church family, have pooled our resources together to purchase, and we have a plan for every single square foot on the 5.82 acres, okay? And what we're going to end up doing for the next year is we're really going to start pushing this, really next February, but I want to see what Tiffin, our church family here, can do in the next 10 months. I mean, there's a possibility. It'd be great if we could do a parking lot before winter, right, before we plow and, everything gets all messed up again. But we need to wait till we have the money. And so if you got a bulletin or a program today, if you noticed, which you guys have probably all looked at because that's what you do during a message, look at all your papers. I get it. But you probably looked at this, okay? This is a Growing with Grace commitment card. We haven't really talked about Growing with Grace much. Growing with Grace is basically our fund that when we give to Growing with Grace, it stays 100% in Tiffin, and it's used to advance the gospel here in Tiffin and Seneca County, usually, all right, mostly by working on, we're going to start picking off some of these projects: parking, auditorium, children's, and adult class space. We got some really cool ideas. We got some really good stuff. And then this is a card that I want you guys to take home. Again, this is only for those who you call Grace your church home. If you're new, you could crumple it up, throw it away. All right, this is not for you. But those of us who call Grace our church home, I want you to take this home. I want you to talk to your spouse. All right, and I want you to talk to God and figure out how much more above what you already do that you could give here to Grace so that we can accomplish reaching more people in our community, so that we can reach even more people, and that God can use, really all these things are tools that God can use to reach people. Those are our family and friends. And that's what this is. Really what we want you to do is take this. You can rip it in half. In theory, it rips. Yeah, it does. It rips in half. And bring that in next week on how much you could you think you can do in the next 10 months. And really, all we're using this for is it just helps us plan. It helps us try to figure out what we can do first, okay? It's all just for planning. We're not going to hold you to it. We're not going to say, Zach Pinkerton, he gave, $100 less. We're not going to do that, okay? We're not going to keep track that way. This is only for us and for planning. Now, I totally get, okay? I think there's this idea of some people in our church, they're like, here's the money thing. They're asking for money. This is for the rich people. No, it's not. Okay? I think God has called us, right? First of all, God has called us all to work hard. But God has called us, if we're a Christian, every single one of us, we should probably be involved with this. Those of us who are, again, part of our church family. Doesn't matter how much you give or how little you give. That doesn't matter. We should all be invested in what God is doing here at Grace. And I guess some other people are going, the church, this is what I thought. It's a big organization, always trying to suck money from people. No, that's not right. All right? That's not what we're all about here. That's completely the wrong perspective. All we are here at Grace, here at our Tiffin campus, here in Tiffin, all right, is that we are a church, a group of people that have a relationship with Jesus, and we come together and we pool our resources together to reach our community. That's what we do. And so if building, if a building will help people find Jesus, we build it. Right? If it's a parking lot will help people, make it easier for people to find Jesus, we put in a parking lot. If working hard at our job helps people find Jesus, we work hard at our job. If it's having passion and working with heart, right, then we work with heart at our job. See, that's what Christians do because it's not about us. We're not doing this for us. We're doing it for the people who aren't in this building yet. See, we don't work for ourselves. That's a waste. That's a complete waste of our work. We work for God, trying to reach people because that's what matters. It doesn't just matter for a couple years or so. No. That matters for eternity. And like I said 2 weeks ago, we have to understand that this generation of Christians, we are responsible for this generation of people. It's on us. So I encourage you, don't waste your work. Let's pray. God, we thank you for today, and we thank you for these words. God, not only have you designed us to work, and you have told us how we need to work hard, you tell us how to work. We work hard, and we need to work with our heart, put our soul into it, because, God, we don't work for a person, we work for you. And that means something. God, we ask that you would help us to work hard. We ask that you'd help us to care about our work. And God, we ask that you'd help us to reach those around us who do not know you, because it's the most important decision that anybody could ever make, because eternity literally weighs in the balance, and help us to understand how serious that is, and help us to have some passion about it. God, we thank you for everything that you've given us. Again, we thank you for this church family, this new church family that you have put together. Lord, we love it. We thank you in everything. In Jesus' name, amen. So if you would, this week, take that card, right? You can rip it in half. Bring the card back next week. You could throw it in the offering plate, or you could take it to the information center, and you could throw that in there. And again, that just helps us plan. And man, we got some exciting things that is going to happen within this next year here in Tiffin, and we got a lot of work that we got to do, and so I'm excited, and I hope you're pumped at least a little bit, but we could go ahead and we'll be dismissed. See you guys next week.
Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you here next week at Grace.